The Brightin Star 60mm f2.8 2:1 macro lens. Keep in mind that Brightin Star sent me this lens to try out and make the video on based on my collaboration terms. Build quality, full metal casing, also has a metal mount. This is a completely manual lens. That means the aperture is mechanical and the focus is mechanical. There will be no data information passed to the camera, obviously, but for a macro lens, I don't see an issue with that. Generally, you're doing manual focus with a macro lens. Not being able to control aperture through there is a consideration at the very least, but it's not a big issue. With the aperture ring, it is not clicked. It's fully smooth. It's good for video situations, but in photography, it's a consideration. It might be challenging to get the same aperture every time with a lens aperture like that. Manual focus ring is large and smooth, has a good amount of travel to it, so you can definitely dial down your focus. Some of the specifications of the lens goes from f2.8 to f22, 10 aperture blades, focus range of 18.2 centimeters to infinity. Optical design is 10 elements in 7 groups. Approximate weight is 660 grams. On the box here it says full frame capable lens. True to some degree, especially in macro situations, it definitely covers the full frame. But in landscape situations, anything towards the infinity focus range, you're going to see vignetting from the mask that they have on the front of the lens, as well as that piece of metal that guides the inner parts of the lens when you're focusing. I did take this lens out to a beautiful Japanese styled garden, took some photos. A lot of them were towards the infinity focus, so there is vignetting, but I also tried to do quite a bit of macro. Didn't use any additional light. I had some challenges with the camera, but it worked out okay. Overall, it was a very enjoyable photo walk with this lens and A7S camera. Being able to get standard photos as well as really close macro photos wherever without having to add any extension tubes or anything like that is a nice benefit. But like I said, if you want to really do that, probably go into APS-C mode or just crop and post with this lens when you do the standard photos. Not super far out like landscape style. You can definitely still get a full frame imaging circle from different distances, but it's going to depend obviously with how this lens is designed. The really unique thing about this is that it is internal focus. You can see the front element shift inside the lens, and you've got that mask on the front to not have all the light go in to the lens, but you can also see that bar that guides the lens as it's shifting inside. There is a piece of coated glass on the front. It's probably a good idea to use a UV filter. They do suggest that on their product page, but for all of my tests, I did not use a UV filter with this lens. The really exciting thing of this lens is its built-in 2:1 magnification. That means you're going to get very close to subjects. At their documentation, they mentioned the minimum focus is around 7 inches, but that's obviously from the sensor plane. So considering how long this lens is, you're going to have around 2 inches of actual distance between your subject and the front of the lens when you're at minimum focus. My main use case for this lens moving forward is going to be in video situations. I like to have detailed close-ups of materials, buttons, whatever on electronics or any other type of product I'm reviewing, showing that on screen so you can get an idea of what it might feel like, what it might look like up close. Having a lens like this is a great benefit for that style of videography. And in that situation, I have controlled lighting. I have a lot of light available to me, so it works out well. I can set the lens to something like f8, which I did in these tests, see what you can get from it. At minimum focus, I was trying to just get an idea of what is possible with this lens at its maximum magnification. I think that's going to be a great use case, and considering the aperture is not clicked, I can even use that in video situations. I won't have to mess with extension tubes or anything like that, which I've done in the past usually. Quick little test going through the focus range. You can see there is a huge amount of focus breathing on this lens. Not surprised, but really you're not going to be adjusting your focus much in video with something like this. It might work out okay depending on how close you want to get or what type of video you're trying to do. But in my case, I'm not going to be doing handheld video because I don't have a camera that has internal stabilization on the Sony. You can see when cropped to APS-C size, the photo looks just fine. So again, if you want to use the lens towards infinity focus, definitely use a crop mode or crop and post. I could probably still save some additional amount of the image in this case. So it really depends. It doesn't have to specifically be APS-C size. One last photo example with full frame versus APS-C crop. APS-C crop looks fine. The vignetting is mostly gone, and all of the additional issues you can see in the full frame imaging circle are not in the APS-C one. Doing manual, in the case of the A7S, I was using zoom in and peaking at the same time. And depending on if you're closer to infinity focus or closer to macro is generally easier to get critical focus because you can just move your camera, move the lens back and forth. But with close to infinity focus, there isn't a lot of travel to the focus ring. Know that it's going to be more challenging to focus in those situations. Landscape stuff can work out nicely, even on full frame sometimes, depending on the distance. I like the versatility of being able to get extreme macro plus standard photos when you want that. This is most likely at a smaller aperture, but you could see there is a fair amount of detail here. Looks good. Here you could see vignetting wasn't a big issue and actually worked out well with this specific framing. And looking at the car in detail, it looks nice. This part of the tree was absolutely tiny, but here you can see there's a really good amount of detail. It looks like it has hair on it. And then I saw this ant. As I tried to capture it, it was difficult. Probably should have used a smaller aperture, higher shutter speed, and just sacrifice ISO. One of my better macro photos you could see is probably at a smaller aperture here, considering there's some sensor dust visible. Here's some indoor photos at f8. Obviously more lighting, more controlled situation on a tripod. That's a little wheel to a toy car. Very cool view of a little stuffed animal. This one's really cool. You can see there are clear lines and solid black lines on this cable. The wrapping is very intricate. This one is a shielded cable. You could see the metal wires in there wrapping around. Very cool. This is a Sony battery connector point. So if you're doing a video about electronics or something, get really close to it. And through the range with these photos, I don't see any chromatic aberrations up close at minimum focus. As I go through the range, it looks good. Brightin Star 60mm f2.8 macro lens. Very unique design. That internal focus has some downsides for full frame, but in APS-C, it's totally fine. That said, in full frame, macro was fine, and through the focus range, you could make it work. And you can also crop and post if you want to at around infinity focus. For my personal use cases in video work, getting detailed product and such, very nice. It's going to work out well. I don't have to mess with macro tubes, dealing with that and attaching it to my other lenses. In this case, I just have the lens ready to go when I need it for that style of videography. Is this going to work for you? It's really going to depend on your personal preferences, how you want it to work. Do you want any type of electronic control? Do you want EXIF information go to the camera? This is a fully manual lens, so that's not going to be the case. Optically, it's challenging for me to decide if it's going to be working for you and what you expect optically. For me, it seems fine, but I do see some downsides, obviously, with the optical performance in regard to full frame cameras. And it is challenging to focus manually in general, but with the macro lens, you can just move the camera back and forth. That tends to be the best, or just doing focus stacking. Aperture ring is not clicked, so that has benefits in video, but it has some downsides in photography. Very interesting lens. I personally like it. Might as well check it out if you're curious. That was the Brightin Star 60mm f2.8 2:1 macro lens. Again, keep in mind that they sent me this lens to try out and make a video on based on my collaboration terms. Scott of Trophy Bonsai, thanks.